The rain hammered against the windows of Kensington Palace that October morning. Inside, Prince William stood motionless, staring at a worn leather envelope placed carefully on his desk. His hands trembled slightly as he reached for it. The envelope was old, decades old. The leather had cracked at the edges, and the royal seal pressed into the wax had faded to barely visible. But what made William's breath catch was the handwriting on the front. He knew that handwriting. He had seen it in letters, in birthday cards kept in boxes. He could barely bring himself to open. It was his mother's. The palisade who had delivered it stood quietly near the door. "Your Highness," she said softly, "the gentleman who brought this. He's been waiting a very long time." William looked up. "How long?" 40 years, sir." The number hung in the air like smoke. 40 years. William wasn't even 40 years old. This letter had existed before he was born. Before his parents had married, before the world knew Princess Diana's name. "Who is he?" William asked. "A former palace guard. His name is Thomas Whitmore. He served during the late 70s and early 80s. He says your mother gave this to him with very specific instructions." The aide paused. "Instructions that could only be fulfilled today." William's throat tightened. He set the envelope down as if it might shatter. Where is he now? In the East drawing room, he refused to leave until he could confirm the letter reached you personally. If you're feeling the emotion already, stay with this story. Subscribe so you never miss moments like these. William walked through the palace corridors, his footsteps echoing on marble floors. His mind raced. His mother had died when he was 15. The grief had been an ocean he learned to swim in, never escaping, only surviving. And now, decades later, she was reaching out from the past. The East drawing room was quiet. Afternoon light filtered through tall windows, casting long shadows across antique furniture. And there, standing by the window, was an elderly man in a simple gray suit. Thomas Whitmore looked to be in his mid-70s. His hair was white, his face lined with age, but his posture was straight, military precise. When he saw William, he bowed deeply. "Your Royal Highness," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "Mr. Whitmore." William extended his hand, and the old man shook it with a grip that was still strong. "Please, sit." They sat across from each other. Thomas's hands rested on his knees, and William noticed they were shaking. "I've carried that letter for 40 years, Thomas said quietly. "Never opened it. Never lost it. Moved it from house to house, country to country. My wife thought I was mad." His eyes glistened. "She died 3 years ago, never knowing what was inside. You never looked?" William asked. "I gave my word." Thomas met his eyes. "Your mother asked me for one promise. She said, 'Thomas, no matter what happens, no matter where life takes you, you must deliver this letter, but only on one specific day.'" William leaned forward. "What day?" "Today," Thomas whispered. "October 17th, 2024. She was very clear. Not a day before. Not a day after." The room seemed to grow colder. William's heart pounded. "That's impossible. She couldn't have known." "I don't understand it either, sir." But those were her words. Thomas reached into his jacket and pulled out a small, folded piece of paper. "She gave me this too. I said I should show you this first, before you open the letter. She said it would help you believe." He handed the paper to William. With shaking hands, William unfolded it. The handwriting was unmistakably his mother's, hurried but clear. And what he read made the world tilt beneath him. His face went pale. He looked up at Thomas, then back at the note, reading it again as if the words might change. "This isn't possible," he breathed, but deep down in a place beyond logic. He knew it was true. Asterisk, the note contained 3 things that should have been impossible for anyone to know in 1979. The first was William's full name, including the middle names that wouldn't be announced until his birth 2 years later. The second was the exact date of a private family gathering that had happened just last month, never publicized, attended only by close family. The third was a single sentence that made William's eyes blur with tears. "You will understand why today, on your son's 7th birthday." Prince George had turned 7 today, William's hands dropped to his lap. The note fell to the floor. He couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. Thomas watched him with knowing eyes, the eyes of a man who had lived with mystery for 4 decades. "I don't know how she knew, sir," Thomas said gently. "I stopped trying to understand it years ago. I just knew I had to keep my promise." William stood abruptly and walked to the window. Rain still fell, blurring the London skyline into watercolor shades of gray. He pressed his palm against the cold glass. "Tell me everything," he said without turning around. "Tell me about the day she gave you this letter." Thomas settled back in his chair. His eyes grew distant, looking into a past only he could see. Gay! It was March 14th, 1979. I had been working palace security for only 3 months. I was nobody special. Just a young guard, 28 years old, trying to do my job well. Lady Diana Spencer wasn't even engaged to your father yet. She was just a girl who visited sometimes. Sweet, shy. But that day she was different. Different how? Terrified. The word hung between them like a ghost. Thomas continued, his voice low. I was stationed near the rose garden. It was late afternoon, nearly dusk. I saw her walking alone, which was unusual. She kept looking over her shoulder, like she was afraid of being followed. When she saw me, she stopped. Just stood there, staring at me for a long moment. William turned from the window. What did she do? She walked straight up to me and said, "You're Thomas Whitmore." I was stunned. How did she know my name? I'd never spoken to her. But she knew. She knew everything about me. My full name, where I was from, that I had a younger sister. Thomas's voice cracked slightly. She said, I need someone I can trust. Someone whose life won't intersect with this family in complicated ways. You're going to leave palace service next year. You're going to move to Canada, did you? William asked. Yes, I had no plans to, but I did. Exactly as she said. Thomas shook his head slowly. She told me things about my own future that day. Things that came true. All of them. The room felt smaller suddenly, the air heavier. She was crying, Thomas continued. Trying to hide it, but I could see. She reached into her bag and pulled out that envelope. She pressed it into my hands and said, Listen to me very carefully, Thomas. What I'm about to ask you might save someone's life someday. William sat back down slowly. Save someone's life. Those were her words. She said, I can't explain how I know what I know. You wouldn't believe me if I tried. But you must promise me, on everything you hold sacred, that you will deliver this letter to my son William on October 17th, 2024. Not before. Not after. That exact day, what did you say? I asked her why. Why that date? She just shook her head and said, because that's the day he'll need it most. The day when everything hangs in balance. Thomas looked directly at William. Then she said something I've never forgotten. She said, my son won't understand it at first. He'll think it's impossible. But he'll need to read this letter before the sun sets today. Before he makes a choice he can't take back. A chill ran down William's spine. He thought of the decision he'd been wrestling with for months. The decision he'd planned to announce tomorrow morning. A decision that would change everything for his family. No one knew about it. He hadn't even told Catherine yet. Did she say anything else? William's voice was barely a whisper. Thomas nodded slowly. She took my hand. She looked me in the eyes and she said, Thank you for doing this. You won't understand why for a very long time. But 40 years from now, when you place this letter in my son's hands, you'll have helped save what matters most. A tear slid down the old man's weathered cheek. Then she walked away. I never saw her again. William sat in silence. Outside, the rain had stopped, but the sky remained heavy and dark. I kept that letter in a safety deposit box, Thomas said. For 40 years, I've checked on it every month. Moved it when I moved. Protected it like it was made of gold. He stood slowly, his knees stiff with age. And now, sir, my promise is fulfilled. The letter is yours. William looked at the leather envelope on the table beside him. His mother's handwriting. His mother's seal. His mother's impossible knowledge. "Mr. Whitmore," William said quietly, "I need to know. In all these years, did you ever suspect what might be inside?" The old man smiled sadly. "Every day, sir. Every single day." He moved toward the door, then paused. "But I'll tell you what I think now, after all these years." "What's that?" "I think your mother loved you more than time itself." The door closed softly behind him, and William was alone with the envelope that had waited 40 years to be opened. William sat alone in the drawing room for 20 minutes, before he could bring himself to touch the envelope. His phone buzzed twice. Messages from his staff about tomorrow's scheduled announcement. The announcement he'd agonized over. The decision that would reshape his children's lives. His relationship with the monarchy, and the future of the crown itself. He silenced the phone. The envelope seemed to pulse with importance on the table. He picked it up slowly, feeling the weight of it. Something was inside beyond just paper. Something small and solid shifted within. The wax seal cracked easily after 4 decades. Too easily. As if it had been waiting inside was a folded letter. It's written on cream-colored stationery and a small object wrapped in tissue paper. William set the object aside and unfolded the letter. His mother's handwriting filled the page, smaller and more hurried than the address on the envelope. "My dearest William," it began. His eyes immediately filled with tears. He could hear her voice in the words, as clearly as if she stood beside him. "If you're reading this, then today is October 17th, 2024. George has turned 7, and you're facing an impossible choice." William's hands began to shake. "I know you don't understand how I can know these things. I don't fully understand it myself. But 3 nights ago, something happened to me that I cannot explain with reason or logic. I saw things, William. I saw the future. Not all of it. Just fragments. Moments. And I saw you, my darling boy, on this exact day." William had to stop reading. He stood, paced to the window, then back. This was impossible. Yet here it was, in her handwriting, sealed 40 years ago. He forced himself to continue. "I saw you sitting in a room much like the one you're in now, holding this letter. I saw the weight on your shoulders. I saw the decision tearing you apart. And I saw what happens if you make the wrong choice." His breath caught. "You're planning to step back, aren't you? To take the children away from public life? To shield them the way I couldn't shield you? You're going to announce it tomorrow. You're going to break with tradition, with duty, with everything the crown demands. Because you're terrified of what this life will do to them." William sank back into his chair. The words on the page blurred as tears spilled over. "Know this fear, my son. I lived it. Every day I looked at you and Harry and wondered if I was sacrificing you on the altar of duty. Every photograph, every public appearance, every moment your childhood was stolen for the world to consume. I hated it. I fought against it. And part of me died every time I saw you hurting." He could barely see the words now. "But William, listen to me. Listen to your mother who loves you more than breath. The decision you're about to make feels like protection. It feels like love. But it's fear. And if you let fear guide you tomorrow, you will lose something you can never get back." The paper trembled in his hands. "I saw what happens if you step back. I saw George growing up away from the crown, safe but adrift. I saw him at 25, angry and lost, demanding to know why you stole his birthright. I saw Charlotte brilliant and burning with purpose, but with nowhere to direct it. I saw Louis sweet and kind, but always wondering who he was meant to be." William made a sound, half sob, half gasp. "I saw you, my darling boy. I saw you at 60, looking back at this day with crushing regret. Knowing you made the choice from fear, not wisdom. Knowing you protected their childhood, but lost their future." He had to stop. Had to breathe. The room spun slightly, but I also saw the other path. The one where you stay. Where you teach them what I never could. Where you show them that duty doesn't have to destroy joy. That service doesn't require sacrifice of self. Where you break the cycle not by running from it, but by transforming it, William wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. I saw George becoming the king he was meant to be, not crushed by the weight, but elevated by purpose. I saw Charlotte changing the world in ways no royal ever has. I saw Louis bringing warmth and humanity to a role that desperately needs it. And I saw you, William. I saw you becoming the father and the king I always knew you could be. The letter continued, but William had to pause. He stood and walked to the window again. The sun was beginning to break through the clouds, sending shafts of golden light across the gardens. After several minutes, he returned to the letter. I know you're wondering how I can possibly know these things, how any of this can be real. That's why I've included something else in this envelope, something that will help you believe. William reached for the small object wrapped in tissue paper. He unwrapped it carefully. In his palm lay a small silver button. It was unremarkable at first glance, just a simple button slightly tarnished with age. But as William looked closer, he saw something engraved on the back. A date. October 17th, 2024. And beneath it, 2 words in tiny script, he believed. William's heart stopped. This button. This exact button. It had fallen off George's jacket this morning at breakfast. William had picked it up, planning to have it sewn back on. It was in his pocket right now. He reached into his pocket with shaking hands. The button was still there. He held both buttons up to the light. They were identical. Exactly identical. The same tarnish pattern. The same tiny scratch on the front. The same manufacturing. Mark on the edge, but one had been sealed in this envelope for 40 years. The other had fallen off his son's jacket. This morning, William collapsed back into his chair, both buttons clenched in his fist. His mind couldn't process what he was holding. The laws of reality bent and broke around these 2 identical objects. He looked back at the letter, his hand shaking so badly he could barely read. By now, you found the button, and you know it's impossible. But it's real, William. All of this is real. I don't know how I saw what I saw. I don't know how I knew to save that button before it even existed. But I did. Because you needed to believe. You needed to know that what I'm telling you comes from a place beyond doubt. The sun had fully broken through now, filling the room with light. So believe me when I say this. Stay. Choose the harder path. Choose duty with love. Choose service with joy. Show your children what I never could. Break the cycle by healing it, not by running from it. William read the final lines through tears that wouldn't stop falling. I won't be there to see it. But somehow, in ways I don't understand, I've already seen it. And my darling boy, it's beautiful. You're going to be extraordinary. Not despite the weight you carry, but because of how you choose to carry it. The letter ended with words that broke him completely. Beyond death. Beyond anything this world can understand. Trust yourself. Trust your children. And trust that some paths, no matter how hard, lead exactly where they're meant to go. Your loving mother, Diana. William didn't know how long he sat there. Time had lost meaning. The buttons lay on the table before him, impossible and real. Twin impossibilities that shattered everything he thought he knew about the world. A soft knock at the door finally pulled him back. Come in, he managed. His voice rough, Catherine entered quietly. She took one look at his face and crossed the room immediately, kneeling beside his chair. William? What's happened? He couldn't speak. He just handed her the letter. Catherine read in silence. William watched her face change, watched disbelief, then wonder, then tears. When she finished, she looked at the buttons on the table. She picked up both, examining them closely. This is... She couldn't finish. There were no words. Possible, William said. But true. Catherine set the buttons down carefully, as if they might vanish. She took William's hands in hers. You were really going to do it, weren't you? Step back. Tomorrow's announcement. I've been planning it for months. I thought I was protecting them. I know. Her eyes were gentle. I've known for weeks. I was waiting for you to tell me you knew. Of course I knew. You're my husband. She smiled sadly, and I understood why. Every time George gets mobbed by photographers, Every time Charlotte has to miss a birthday party because of an official event. Every time Louis asks why he can't have a normal life like his friends. I've had the same thoughts, William. The same fears. But your mother is right. Catherine's voice was firm now. Running from fear isn't protection. It's just another kind of cage. William looked at the letter again. How could she have known? How could any of this be possible? Does it matter? Catherine asked quietly. Whether it's supernatural, or whether somehow impossibly, she figured out a way to reach across time itself. Does the how matter more than the what? She saw the future. She saw our children. She saw possibilities, Catherine corrected gently. She saw two paths, and she's telling you which one leads to who they're meant to become. William stood and walked to the window again. Outside, he could see the gardens where he'd played as a child, where his mother had chased him and Harry laughing, giving them stolen moments of normalcy in lives that were anything but normal. I'm so afraid of repeating the mistakes, he whispered, of crushing them under the weight like I was crushed, like she was crushed. Catherine came to stand beside him. Then don't repeat the mistakes. Make new ones. She smiled slightly. Better ones. The world isn't the same as it was when you were young. You're not the same as your father was. And your mother learned things in her short life that can guide you. Now, she died because of this life. She died because of a car accident and a broken system and 1,000 failures that had nothing to do with you or your children. Voice was gentle but firm. Don't let tragedy dictate your future. Let her wisdom guide it instead. William turned to face her. What if I make the wrong choice? You already made the wrong choice, Catherine said softly, planning to step back, to hide them away, to let fear win. That was the wrong choice. Now you're being given the chance to make the right one. He looked at her for a long moment. This woman who had stood beside him through everything, who had given him 3 beautiful children, who had never wavered, even when the weight seemed unbearable. You think I should stay? I think you should choose with love instead of fear. And I think you already know what that choice is. William turned back to the window. The sun was setting now, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose. His mother had said he needed to read the letter before sunset. Before he made a choice he couldn't take back, the sun was almost gone. Call them, he said suddenly. Call George, Charlotte, and Louis. I need to talk to them. Catherine smiled. They're already here. They've been waiting in the West Room. George knew something was happening. He asked if you were okay. William's throat tightened. This boy, his serious, thoughtful, 7-year-old boy, who already carried much awareness of who he would become, they went together to the West Room. All 3 children sat on the sofa, Charlotte between her brothers. George sat up straighter when William entered. Charlotte bounced slightly with curiosity. Louis, at 4, simply grinned at his father. William sat on the coffee table facing them, so he was at their level. I need to tell you all something important, he said. George's expression grew serious. Charlotte stopped bouncing. Even Louis seemed to sense the weight of the moment. I've been thinking for a long time about your lives, about what it means to be part of this family, about all the hard parts. The cameras, the rules, the things you can't do that other children can. He paused. And I've been thinking about taking you away from all of that, giving you a more normal life. George's eyes widened. You mean we wouldn't be royal anymore? Something like that. But George's voice was small. But I'm going to be king someday. Only if you want to be, William said gently. Only if this is the life you choose. George looked at his siblings, then back at William. When he spoke, his voice was quiet but clear. Did you choose it? No, I was born into it. Do you wish you weren't? William opened his mouth to say yes, to say he'd wished it 1,000 times. But looking at his son's earnest face, he realized the answer was more complicated than that. Sometimes, he said honestly, sometimes I wish for the freedom to be just a normal father, just a normal person. But then I think about the good we can do, the people we can help, the way our family can make a difference. He paused. And I think about you three, about who you're becoming. And I realize that maybe this life, with all its difficulties, is also teaching you to be extraordinary people.
Oh.
Charlotte spoke up, her voice thoughtful. Mummy says being royal means being of service. That's right. Service means helping people who need help. Yes, she tilted her head. Then why would we want to stop? The simplicity of it struck William like a bell. Out of the mouths of children, Louis, not fully understanding but wanting to contribute, said, I like being a prince. I get to wear fancy clothes. They all laughed, and the tension broke slightly. But George wasn't laughing. He was watching William with those two old eyes. Papa, he said quietly, are you afraid for us? William's breath caught. Yes, he admitted, every day, because of what happened to Granny Diana. The name hung in the air. They rarely spoke of her to the children. Too painful. Too complicated. Yes, William said again. George nodded slowly, processing. Then he said something that broke and healed William's heart in the same moment. Mummy says Granny Diana was brave. She says even when she was scared, she kept trying to help people. He looked directly at William. I want to be brave like her, even if it's hard. William had to look away. He stared at the floor, fighting the emotion rising in his chest. When he looked back up, all three children were watching him with concern. You're crying, Papa, Charlotte said softly. Happy tears, he managed. Sometimes grown-ups cry when they're proud. Proud of us. George asked, so proud I can barely breathe. Catherine moved to sit beside the children, pulling Louis onto her lap. She gave William an encouraging nod. I received something today, William said. A letter. From your Granny Diana. All three children's eyes went wide. Even Louis understood the impossibility of that. But I know. She wrote it a very long time ago. Before I was even born. Before she married my father. But somehow, she knew to write it. And she knew that today, I would need to read it.
What did it say?
George asked. William considered his words carefully. She told me that I was going to have a choice to make. A hard choice. Between keeping you safe by hiding you away from this life, or trusting you to be strong enough to handle it. What did she say to do? Charlotte asked. She said to trust you. To believe that you three are capable of extraordinary things. That this life, with all its challenges, isn't a burden to protect you from. It's an opportunity to help you become who you're meant to be. George sat up straighter. Charlotte's eyes brightened. Even Louis seemed to puff up slightly with pride. But, William continued, she also said that it only works if we do it differently than it's been done before. If we make it about love and joy and service, not just duty and sacrifice. If we protect your childhood while also preparing you for your future, how do we do that? George asked. Honestly, I'm not entirely sure yet. William smiled. But I think we figure it out together. As a family, we make new rules. We break the old ones that don't work. We keep the cameras away when you need space. We say no to events when you need to be children. But we also embrace the good parts. The chances to help people. The ability to make a difference. The privilege of service. Charlotte leaned forward. So we're staying? We're still going to be royal? If you want to be? If you choose it, I choose it, George said immediately. Me too, Charlotte echoed. Me three, Louis added, not wanting to be left out. William laughed through his tears. Then we stay together. Catherine was crying now too, smiling through the tears. She reached out and pulled William into an embrace that quickly became a tangle of all five of them, holding on to each other like lifelines. When they finally pulled apart, George had a question. Papa, how did Granny Diana know? How did she know about today? I don't know, George. Some things can't be explained. We just have to trust that they're true. Like magic? Louis asked. Like love? William corrected. Love that's so strong it reaches across time itself. After the children were taken to bed, William and Catherine stood alone in the drawing room. The letter lay on the table, precious and impossible. What are you going to do about tomorrow's announcement? Catherine asked. William picked up his phone. He had 17 missed calls from his staff. Messages asking for final confirmation on the statement that would change everything. He typed a brief message. Cancel tomorrow's announcement. We're not stepping back. I'll explain in the morning. The response came within seconds. Confusion, concern, questions. He silenced the phone again. They're going to ask why you changed your mind, Catherine said. Let them ask. What will you tell them? William looked at the letter, at the two impossible buttons, at the evidence of a love that defied death and time. The truth. That I received counsel from someone wiser than any of them. Someone who saw further than any of us could. And that I finally listened. Catherine picked up the letter carefully. What will you do with this? Keep it. Treasure it. And when George is old enough, when he's facing his own impossible choices, I'll show him. I'll let him know that his grandmother loved him before he was born. That she saw him. That she believed in him. He'll need that someday. We all do. They stood together at the window, watching the last light fade from the sky. The deadline Diana had set, sunset had passed. William had read the letter. He had made his choice. A choice based not on fear, but on faith. Do you think she knows? Catherine asked quietly. Wherever she is, do you think she knows you chose the right path? William thought of the letter, of the impossible knowledge, of the button that existed in two places at once, of a mother's love reaching across 40 years to save her son from his own fear. I think she's always known, he said. I think that's the whole point. She didn't just see the future. She helped shape it. By trusting Thomas Whitmore to keep his promise, by writing words that would reach me exactly when I needed them most, by proving that some things are more powerful than time. What things? Love, truth, family. He turned to face Catherine, and the faith that we're capable of being better than those who came before us. Not by rejecting what they built, but by transforming it into something that serves not just duty, but joy. Catherine leaned her head on his shoulder. Your mother would be proud.
I hope so.
God, I hope so. They stood there for a long time, as the room grew dark around them. Neither moved to turn on lights. They simply stood together, held by each other, and by the presence of someone who had loved them both across the impossible distance between life and death. Finally, William spoke again. Tomorrow, I'm going to call Thomas Whitmore. I'm going to thank him properly. 40 years of carrying a promise. 40 years of faith. That's a long time to believe in something you can't understand. Maybe that's what real faith is, William said. Believing not because you understand, but because someone you trust asked you to. Thomas trusted my mother. I trust her too. And our children will learn to trust themselves, because you showed them how. Because she showed me first. The moon had risen now, casting silver light across the gardens. Somewhere in the palace, their 3 children slept, dreaming whatever children dream. Unaware that their futures had just been decided. Unaware that their grandmother had reached across time to protect them, they would know someday. When they were old enough, when they faced their own crossroads. But for now, they were just children. Royal children, yes. Future king and princess and prince, yes. But also just 3 young souls who loved dinosaurs and drawing and stories at bedtime. And that, William realized, was exactly as it should be. The choice wasn't between normal and royal. The choice was between fear and love. Between hiding and becoming. Between protecting them from who they were meant to be, or helping them embrace it with joy. His mother had made that choice 40 years ago, when she entrusted an impossible letter to a young guard who didn't understand but believed. Anyway, now William had made his choice too, and tomorrow, when the sun rose on a day he'd planned to announce their departure from royal life, he would instead announce something different, a new way forward, a transformation, not a retreat. His mother's legacy, finally understood. 3 weeks later, William sat in the same drawing room with Thomas Whitmore. But this time, the meeting was different. Warmer, No longer strangers bound by mystery, but two men connected by a promise kept. Thomas looked healthier than he had during their first meeting. The weight of 40 years had lifted from his shoulders. He sat comfortably, a cup of tea in his weathered hands.
"I never thought I'd be back here,"
Thomas said, looking around the room. "After I left palace service in 1980, I assumed I'd never set foot in these halls again. Yet you carried that letter all this time? Across continents? Through decades." William shook his head in wonder. "Most people would have given up, or at least opened it." "Promise is a promise," Thomas said simply, "especially one given to her." "Tell me more about that day." "The day she gave you the letter?" "You told me the facts, but I want to know. What did she seem like? What was she feeling?" Thomas set down his teacup and leaned back, his eyes distant. "She was afraid, like I said. But it wasn't fear for herself. It was fear for you. For children she hadn't even met yet. She kept saying, 'I have to get this right. I have to make sure he understands.' Did she say how she knew? How any of it was possible?" "She tried to explain once," Thomas said slowly. "She said she'd had what she called a vision. 3 nights before, she'd fallen asleep and dreamed, but it wasn't a normal dream. She said it was like watching a film of the future. Crystal clear, undeniable. When she woke up, she knew things. Specific things, dates, names, events that hadn't happened yet." William leaned forward. "Did she tell anyone else?" "She said she tried to tell your father, Prince Charles, as he was then, but he didn't believe her. Thought she was having some kind of episode. She said that's when she knew she had to find another way. A way to get the message to you without anyone interfering or thinking she was mad. So she chose you? A guard who would leave and take the secret with him." "Exactly. She was brilliant in that way. She knew I'd have no reason to stay connected to the palace. No reason to be questioned or pressured. I'd just be a man with a letter, waiting for a date that meant nothing to anyone but her. And you never doubted? Never questioned whether you should just open it?" Thomas smiled. "Oh, I doubted, especially in the early years. I'd hold that envelope and think, what if it's nothing? What if she was just troubled? And I'm wasting my life on a delusion." He paused. "But then small things would happen. Things she'd predicted about my life. My move to Canada. Meeting my wife exactly where and when she said I would. Little confirmations that what she'd told me was real. She predicted when you'd meet your wife, down to the day. She said, you'll meet her on a Tuesday in October, in a bookshop in Vancouver. She'll be reaching for the same book as you." Thomas's eyes grew misty. "And it happened exactly that way. October 12th, 1982. A Tuesday. We both reached for a copy of Watership Down at the same moment." William felt chills run down his spine. "That's incredible. It was the first real proof I had that everything she'd told me was true. After that, I never doubted again. I knew that letter contained something important, something that would matter exactly when she said it would." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Then William asked the question that had been weighing on him. "Did my mother seem happy? That day you met her?" Thomas considered carefully. "No," he said honestly. "She seemed burdened. Like someone carrying knowledge they desperately wished they didn't have. She kept apologizing to me for involving me in something so strange. But she also seemed determined. Like she'd found a way to fight against something terrible, and she wasn't going to let anything stop her. She was fighting against my fear," William said quietly. "Fighting against a decision I would make 40 years later. Reaching across time itself to save me from myself. And it worked. It did." William stood and walked to the window. Outside, George and Charlotte were playing in the gardens, under the watchful eyes of their protection officers. Louis was napping. A normal afternoon, as normal as their lives could be. "I made the announcement yesterday," William said. "A new vision for how we'll approach royal service. More flexibility. More protection for their privacy. But no stepping back. No hiding." "I saw it on the news," Thomas said. "The response has been remarkable. People seem to understand, or at least they're willing to trust that we know what we're doing." William smiled slightly. "I couldn't tell them the real reason for the change, of course, They'd think I'd lost my mind. Perhaps. Or perhaps they'd understand that some mysteries are meant to stay mysteries. William turned back to face Thomas. I have something for you. He reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a small box. Thomas looked surprised. Sir, you don't need to, please. Open it. Thomas opened the box carefully. Inside was a medal, custom-made. On one side was engraved, "For service beyond duty." On the other, "With gratitude, William." It's not an official honor, William said. I can't give you one of those without questions I can't answer. But I wanted you to have something. A token of what your promise meant. What it saved? Thomas's hands shook as he held the medal. Tears ran freely down his weathered face. 40 years, he whispered. 40 years I wondered if I was doing the right thing. If it mattered, if anyone would ever know, it mattered more than you can imagine. You helped save my family. You helped me see clearly when I was blinded by fear. You kept a promise to a woman who trusted you with her son's future. William's voice grew thick with emotion. You're a hero, Thomas. In the truest sense of the word. Thomas wiped his eyes. I just kept a promise. The world would be a better place if more people did the same. They talked for another hour. Thomas shared more memories of that day in 1979. William shared his plans for the children's futures, for the transformation of how the royal family would operate. They spoke of Diana, of her wisdom, of her impossible gift. When Thomas finally stood to leave, William walked him to the door personally. The old man paused on the threshold. I have one question I've been afraid to ask, Thomas said. Ask anything. The button. The one that was in the envelope. How is it possible it's identical to one that fell off George's jacket this morning? I've tried to understand it, but... William pulled both buttons from his pocket. He'd been carrying them with him ever since. I've thought about it constantly. The only explanation I can come up with is that somehow, in that vision or dream or whatever it was, my mother saw this moment. She saw the button fall, and she acquired one from the future and sent it back to prove the truth of what she was saying. But that's impossible. So is everything else that happened. Yet here we are. Thomas looked at the buttons for a long moment. Then he smiled. I've spent 40 years protecting an impossible truth. I suppose 2 impossible buttons aren't much stranger. They shook hands at the door. Thank you, Thomas, for everything. Thank you for trusting her. For believing. After Thomas left, William returned to the drawing room. He placed the letter back in its envelope, along with one of the buttons. The other he would keep in his pocket. A reminder. A talisman. He thought about writing a response to his mother's letter, something to be sealed away, perhaps to be opened by George someday. But what would he say that she didn't already know? Instead, he simply spoke aloud to the empty room. Thank you, ma'am. I understand now. I understand what you were trying to teach me. That love is the only thing stronger than fear. That faith isn't about certainty, it's about trust. And that the best way to honor you isn't to protect our children from this life, but to show them how to live it with joy. The room was silent. No supernatural response. No sign from beyond. Just quiet and light and the distant sound of children playing. But William felt her presence anyway. Not as a ghost or a vision, but as a guiding truth woven into the fabric of his life. She had reached across death, across time, across the impossible distance between past and future, to save him from his own fear. And he had listened. That evening, as William tucked George into bed, his son asked a question. Papa, will you tell me about Granny Diana someday? Really tell me? I mean, not just that she was kind and loved us, but who she really was. William smoothed George's hair back from his forehead. Yes, when you're older, when you can understand. How will I know when I'm old enough? You'll know. Trust me. George settled into his pillows. Papa, do you think she can see us? From wherever she is? William thought of the letter, of the impossible knowledge, of the love that had traveled 40 years to reach him exactly when he needed it most. Yes, he said with absolute certainty. I think she sees us. I think she's always seen us, and I think she's very, very proud." George smiled and closed his eyes. Within minutes, he was asleep. William stood in the doorway for a long time, watching his son breathe. This boy who would be king? This child who had chosen duty with love, service with joy, just as his grandmother had hoped. The future was still uncertain. There would be challenges ahead. Difficult moments. Times when the weight would feel unbearable. But they would face it together. As a family, with the wisdom of those who came before and the courage to forge a better path forward. William turned off the light and closed the door softly. Somewhere across the impossible distance between life and death, he felt his mother's smile. The promise had been kept. The message had been delivered. The choice had been made. And love, as it always does, had won.